Welcome to the Artistry of Code podcast, where we, together with our guests, are seeking ways of doing things right and having fun with it.
Software, architecture, soft skills, teamwork, and other crazy buzzwords.
Are you ready? Let's bring more value to the business.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Artistry of Code podcast. Your hosts for today are
Artur Wolny,
Marek
and Grzegorz. Today we wanted to talk about tools, which we believe should be present in the toolkit of every modern and professional developer. But before we do the deep dive, let's sum up the last 2 weeks. Marek, would you do the honors?
The last 2 weeks on my side were pretty exciting. I've done my first ever concrete job in my life. So I poured 600 kgs of concrete to build the pillars to be used as support for the heat pump next to my house. But in terms of developer's life, I've discovered the tool which is called npm check, and it's delivered by npm itself. And this tool allows to go through your dependencies and check them in many aspects. But the functionality which I found useful is that it can show you if you are using the packages which you have declared in the package.json, which already allowed me to remove some of them from our package.json at my work. But also the other pretty nice, it's not really the tool, but it's part of the tool, which is the Jest CLI, is that it allows you to automatically run only the tests which are affected by your changes in relation to master. So I'm not sure if it was always the case, but yes, I remember that a long time ago we could use some tricks there to get there, but it's pretty easy to do that now, but you have to be careful. It will not work for dynamic imports. So if you ever using dynamic imports, you shouldn't really use this since changed since function of Jest, because it can not catch the tests. Artur, anything on your side?
Oh, it's not that much as for you. I've heard that you had so much work that you didn't probably have time to load up your wheelbarrow. In my case, there's just lots of work going on daily in the, I wouldn't say the office because I'm working remotely from home, but we need to deliver some very important business goal for the 1st of March, and I can feel, the atmosphere around this, in the office, and people are working together, and I just can see it on the meetings. But there's lots of work needed to be done, and the time is running quickly. So this is my last 2 weeks. Lots of
deadline in the air.
Yeah, the feeling of the deadline and some kind of axe swinging somewhere over our heads.
Yeah. So the one of the things which I heard in the past from one of the workmates is that there is no such thing as deadlines, because when the time comes, nobody's pretty much dead, but it's rather a sad line. So eventually people might be sad because of reaching that day, but necessarily they are still living. So that's good.
I've heard confirmations that there are not gonna be heads rolling on the floors.
Cool. So when it comes to me and my last 2 weeks, I'm starting to sink more and more into the new role, which I was covering in the past episodes, which means at the moment reading a lot of specification from Azure related to the cloud services, as the assignment which I was given is to design an architecture which is going to span for multiple regions in Azure, which brings a lot of interesting problems to tackle, to solve. analyze. So at the moment, it's pretty much paperwork, I would say. A lot of modeling. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this stuff. I have the opportunity to exercise the C4 modeling approach. So I was doing this on artificial systems before, and now I'm having the possibility right now to do it on a living one. So yeah, really happy to have it. Okay, so I guess that at this point we can slowly move to the main topic for today. So it's all about the tooling. And the first point from which we wanted to start is to talk about the tools which we as developers can utilize to write better code in terms of code quality. So Marek, you've partially covered this today in the sum up of the last 2 weeks. Do you have any further insights on the source code quality tools which can be used by our listeners?
Yeah, I would start with the tools which we all use to write the code at the first place. We, as all of us three, we are more like IntelliJ family guys. But yeah, in terms of IDs, we have quite a bunch of choice on the market, both free and paid tools. I love WebStorm, and I have to say that, and I am not shy to say that. It's a great IDE. It's most of all, it's not really expensive, and especially if you will consider the price compared to the earning which we fortunately gain as developers. So it's really fairly priced, I would say. I like this tool as much, which led me to even considering applying for the developer's advocate job at some point, but I didn't take the route. But yeah, WebStorm is a really nice environment, and it allows me to not having to jump outside of the IDE for most of the time, because I have everything in place there, and I keep seeing the improvements which are coming there. So big appreciation to JetBrains developers for really great work. I can refer to the other thing here, which is integration of the tools, which WebStorm provides. And I love the how good it works with, for example, Prettier or SLint or Jest or Node Debugger. And I can probably keep mentioning different stuff. Yeah, but yeah, as soon as I have it set up for myself, it's like it's working like a charm.
Yeah, I must say that it works well not only for WebStorm, because there are lots of those variants for different languages, for different use cases. I remember PHP Storm, and the feeling was like totally the same. It was so well prepared for the use case that I didn't even thought about switching to something else. And the difference, for example, comparing those PHP Storm, for example, WebStorm, other Storm suffix EDs with, for example, Eclipse that I have been previously using, or
NetBeans.
Yeah. NetBeans was my favorite at some point of time. I wouldn't dare to go back to switch to those tools, EDEs.
And when we're thinking about those kind of tools, when we think in terms of integration, right? So we can point out some linters, like the prettifiers, so the code formatters, so which are increasing, like the readability of the code, so that everybody uses the same. I recall that PHP had the PSRs, so the coding standards, which actually tackled quite a lot of discussions when we use those standards like that. But then again, I recall something like Code Sniffer, Actually, that was the PHP code sniffer. And I can't tell if we have the very same thing in the Node.js and the JavaScript environment. So it was essentially sniffing for code smells. I believe the equivalent of this would be slint. It's doing linting plus code sniffing in a way, right?
Yeah, I would say so. At least to some degree, it won't do really complex analyze of the code, I think, but we still have some tools like that for which work for JS. I would say about Sonar Cube / Sonar Cloud, which is also really easy to integrate with WebStorm. So we can see all the stuff there. It can be sometimes a bit bullying in terms of all of the issues which it is finding in the code, but in the end, if we go this route and implement the Sonar Cloud at the company or on our open source projects, for example, because the Sonar Cloud is free for open source projects, we have to take the decision and basically follow that and agree with the tool when it tells us that something is wrong. Yeah, I recall that Grzegorz mentioning many times that you like when there is someone watching and telling you that you are doing something dumb.
Wrong. Yeah, definitely. I'm still totally into it. So that's the reason why I like to employ linters, any sort of automated verification, which is going to pay attention more than I do, especially, when the teams and the development tends to want to be fast, right? So everybody wants to have the speed of delivery, stuff like that. And I can't recall who said it right now. I'm just going to find this out and put it back into the description of the episode. It was one of the big minds like Uncle Bob or Kent Beck or one of those guys who said that if you want to go fast, you have to have a way to stay clean, right? So it's like with the cars. You're going fast over a puddle, or then you're going to have a big splash, and you need something which is going to keep you clean. And having those linters, having proper IDEs, code sniffers, any sort of automated detection is going to help you out, right? To have it. Now, I think what's also worth mentioning is like commenting on the ease of successful implementation of those tools. So I say that like linters, for instance, are way much easier to be implemented on an organization than, for instance, Sonar, right? So you guys recall what kind of problems we had with this. So the biggest difficulty which we had really with employing Sonar, what was it?
The license.
The approval for the cost.
Yeah. The fact that we needed to host it, the fact that we needed to apply to the pipeline at some level. Yeah, that there is some quite significant amount of work that we need to put in there to make it work, and it's not only dependent on us. So yeah, I think that for the starter, the Git hook is perfect, and this is something that we are missing. We haven't said it, that even though we have some kind of tool, we need to make sure that everyone will use it in the same way.
I would say that Git hooks won't give you that certainty, because I've seen that many times. People even aliasing Git commit with hidden no verify inside, or the same for Git push. Or I've seen developers removing the Git hooks at all on their local environment. So yeah, it happens. So never trust Git hooks if you go there. It's I like Git hooks in general, yeah, but you cannot trust other team members that they are always running them. Yeah? So only CI is a source of truth in this case.
The control is the highest form of trust. Said somebody. I don't know who. You can check on your own.
And by the way, this is not something which we praise. We're just having a laugh out of it. So
Yeah.
we're just laughing. But I agree that the same thing that we apply on the daily basis should be like repeated in the proper implementation of continuous integration. That's actually what we all three of us did in one of our common use cases. And I would encourage everyone to keep the same track. Yeah, I wanted also to refer to what you said, Marek, about people like deciding not to verify. Yeah, it's true that they can do it, yeah, but you can force everything. Like you can even trick TypeScript to make JavaScript do some ugly things. You can do it because it's some technical detail. But the thing is that you cut down the situation when someone just forgot to run some tool, and I think it's a lot. It's a lot to cut this tail. And the situation when someone is like enforcing skipping all those checks is something that you probably won't be able to jump over without this CI. But you should definitely start with it, especially when you have tools like Husky, for example, in our beloved Node.js that you can use easily to create your own scripts.
Yeah, I would get back to what Grzegorz was referring to, the great times when we were implementing Sonar Cloud at our previous company. We hit many issues, but I would say that from my experience, I see the very same issues happening even if you implementing ESLint rule, even not whole ESLint thing, but even if you want to enable some strict rule on the code, on the existing code base. When you want to do that, you have to basically create a separate MR just for this change, because it will affect, even if it's if the autofix is there, yeah, because the autofix is great for many rules, but it will still touch like hundreds of files just to do some small adjustment, or you will have to manually change them, but it will still be a fairly big change in terms of number of files.
So what you just talked about reminded me about a very important aspect. Like if we have our listeners today and they're going to pick up some of the tools which are relevant for the ecosystem that they're in, like PHP, Node.js, .NET, Scala, Go, whatever, I believe each and every of them has their own toolkit. And now giving that example of a very strict rule being added. So we as a team would start to use like a linting tool, which is going to block changes in the code which aren't good for us. Obviously, your code may already have those problems. So the way we dealt with that in the past is that we started to use that new rule. But we lowered the severity of this to a warning, for instance, right? So it was non-blocking. It was visible that the problem is there. People were able to tackle this problem, but it was not blocking. So we were introducing this in a soft way. And the thing which I wanted to say about Sonar, and we have to admit that we failed at that implementation to some extent, is that we wished to have the Sonar feedback being included as part of the merge request blocking points, right? So we didn't want to we wanted to integrate the, I believe that was, okay, we wanted to integrate Bitbucket with Sonar Cloud in a way that the PRs are going to be blocked when there are some linting issues. And due to the amount of the issues that we had to deal with, we never came to the point in which we enabled that feature, because the technical debt, let's call it this way, was still too big to make use of that full integration, which is going to keep the quality even higher. So kind of the keynote here is that, or the takeaway is that within the teams, we really have to start using those tools early on a project's lifetime to prevent the amount of the debt which is going to build up, because otherwise at some point we'll have to pay it back, right?
Yeah, I would also say that on as a benefit of introducing any kind of linting or prettifying or any quality tool like that early in the project, the great benefit which I see, and making the rules set, let's say, strict as possible, it has a great benefit of saving the time on the reviews, because we don't have to spend time on unnecessary discussions, because we agreed on some rules and the rules are already there. And if the code doesn't meet the expectations, let's say, in terms of the rules, it doesn't even reach the review point. So it saves the time, and in the end it saves the money for the company. So it's a great benefit.
And it saves a lot of those hard discussions, right? So it's not even about them being unnecessary. They are just sometimes hard. And if we have a common protocol which we use, then it's going to be easier for all of us.
The hard discussions aren't 80 versus 120 characters in the line. Yeah, they are hard to maybe solve because they are unsolvable, but yeah, they are not really hard in the end.
It depends if someone is attached or not. I met someone that is in love with tabs, and I haven't seen this kind of person for a long, long time. Probably because I don't work with Python either.
Okay, so there's another section which we wanted to cover, which was named Visual and Collaborative Tools. So especially at the times of pandemic right now, the remote work and remote collaboration is a big thing, right? So let's have a couple of minutes here on that section. Guys, what kind of visual and collaborative tools did you use so far, which you can totally recommend?
Yeah, the best code sharing tool is always the screen sharing. Yeah, that was the case like 2 years ago. I can clearly recall that we used to, all of us developers used to more or less work this way. And we were mostly comfortable with that. And I would say it was because that remote work was not that spread around the industry yet. So because it was not that very often, we could handle it this way. But yeah, during the pandemic, the code collaborative tools for the coding became really necessary. It was not there at the beginning of the COVID times, but after a few months of COVID, our beloved JetBrains delivered the tool, which is called Code with Me, which was great when it was introduced, and they made it even greater because at the beginning we had to run the meeting like Zoom or Google Meet, and on top of that the like Code with Me session, while in the end you don't even need the Google Meet or Zoom because you have all meeting capabilities, including the chat inside your IDE, which is freaking awesome in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember that time when the Code with Me was not yet available, and we tried in a team to do the collaborative extreme programming session. And I remember that the most painful of all that session was the change of the person that was typing on his own computer. It was so time consuming, and especially when we decided to to keep the time box. There was some time when we just stopped at some point when the code was not working. And this was the time when we needed to first of all use the no verify, so anti-pattern from our conversation that we already mentioned. That was the first thing. Second of thing that we needed to push all the changes. Remember to keep everything, because you don't only have to skip verification on the commit. You sometimes need to also to handle with some rules applied to a Git server. And I remember there were some rules there about, for example, the branch name. So now when you can share the same code base, only switching the person typing, it's so much easier. And now it's the time actually to practice extreme programming when we have the right tool.
Yeah, and dear listeners, this is what happens when you don't do TDD and you want to do pair programming without tools which allow this, right? So, what Artur mentioned, you need to do a couple of cheats in order to get the code to the other person so that they can further edit that. So yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like about the TDD, because then we actually tried it with TDD, and still you couldn't like create the test and push it because it failed. So you have to, like at least turn it off, silence it.
Because you wanted to stay within the time box.
Yeah,
right?
that
okay.
was
So the time ticked, and then okay, yeah. So you're right. TDD wouldn't help here, definitely.
I had TDD like experience in this kind of working, which I would like to share when. I was working with one of our colleagues on some stuff. We at some point we were coding on one of the machines, but one of us was connected remotely, obviously, and we've split to tests. So one guy was doing the tests, and one guy was finishing the implementation or doing some part of implementations. And then we kept having tests running on watch. And thanks to that, we at some point, even we just talking not too much during that coding, we reached to that point when the tests were green, without influencing, let's say, the implementation at that point. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. So yeah, and when I'm on watch thing, this is something which I should maybe mention before. I always do that for the projects which I work on, is to enable like default configuration in WebStorm for Jest to always include watch. So when you have your tests, it doesn't matter if it's new code because obviously for new code you will write tests first, TDD, or you're refactoring. The tests will keep running for you inside WebStorm, which is just great, and you keep having like this short feedback loop there. So I highly recommend setting that.
So what we've covered here is like collaboration when we look at this on the code level. So when it comes to other possibilities, I don't feel like we have anything else to mention, really. So we can move one level higher here. So at some point when we even code, or we do it in pairs, or even on a mob style, then having the notion of the direction is very important, which means that we have the need to somehow outline those changes, show them up, describe them in a way. So the way I found myself working with this differently, obviously that's screen sharing. I for some reason I wasn't using Notepad to outline a couple of things. More commonly, I was using a Markdown based tool, which had some capabilities to outline the bullet points for the implementation. But we as people, we are visual most of the time. So for me, the big section is also the visual tools, and here I could definitely recommend something which is free and enables collaboration with multiple people. And that's a project which I heard from about Kent Beck. So Ken Beck tweeted about this once upon a time, and this is the way I discovered Excalidraw, which is an open source free tool allowing you to draw cool charts and graphics in the web browser. It has a support for sessions, so you can invite a couple of people there, and people can draw along. It tends to be quite laggy at some points, especially if you're doing a lot of things in the same time. But then again, it has proven to be very, very useful. I saw a lot of people on the team which I was working on, like you guys, picking it up immediately to draw your things using this. This is very cool. Starting, you can do graphics for your presentation, a live session that essentially allows you to replace a whiteboard. So in the good old office style, you had the whiteboard and the marker. Now you can do it using Excalidraw. Cool functions like copy the whole thing to a PNG. Artur, thank you for discovering that this is a life-saving function, to copy a part of the image there to a PNG and then just paste it to Jira command, and that's working out of the box. A very cool functionality. I do know that the other option, which is very commonly used across the industry, is Miro. But most of the time, that's the paid option. I saw a lot of consultants and consulting agencies using that with their customers to do some collaborative sticky note pasting. Most of the time, I'm seeing this in the context of sticky notes, really. I also at some point used it for backlog refinements when the teams, right? So we were doing the splitting of the user stories to smaller ones, identifying the epics, user story mapping. Definitely something that can be done with Miro. Do you guys have any favorite visual tools which you use as developers to outline some like ideas to share it?
Yeah, of course, I prefer in those simple situations, I prefer to use Excalidraw. I like how it looks after drawing something. It looks just like you could pick a whiteboard and draw something by hand, and it's like visually very attractive to me. What annoys me about the Excalidraw is that it's a very good thing that they introduced some packs of already prepared drawings, and that you can reuse, some kind of library. But the bad thing is that when you create this kind of library item, it's very hard to make it like pinnable. So you can pin, for example, the end of the arrow to some custom drawing. Usually it's not possible, and when you're trying to pin to some kind of library item, it usually pins in a different place that you wanted, and when you're trying to move it around, it just destroys the whole picture. So you have to be careful with it. I also like about Excalidraw that it contains some paid features that may help like working with the whole team or with other architects, for example. So it's like a step further. What I got to know some different tooling is Figma, but it's very similar to Miro, at least in my experience. So I didn't use that much, but it's my first thought that when I saw it, it's like it's the clone of Miro, or Miro was the clone of Figma. I don't really know, but something that totally got me last time is a tool available as a website, and it's called websequencediagrams.com, and it's super cool because then you can create those sequence diagrams using some kind of prepared language. So you're typing, and the image is automatically generated. I remember that I find the sequence diagrams the most useful of all of those UML diagrams in our daily work, and it was such a pain to draw it with those arrows, with those boxes that you needed to create this, I don't know, swim lanes, right? Something like this, to keep it organized. And this tool does it for you. You just create participants, you create the flow, like defining a graph using the text, and it has like few styles to use, and I find it very useful. It is something that for sure will stay with me for longer.
So I guess you're going to love what I'm going to say next, because I've just opened that websequencediagram.com tool, which you've just mentioned, and I've looked at the syntax of the language which you're using there, and it reminds me about the thing called Mermaid.js. So this is, the syntax is very similar. I wouldn't be surprised if Mermaid.js is used underneath. And the reason why I think that's cool is that we're going to talk about this like in a moment, or even we can switch there to the text editors. Like we talked about the IDEs, and beside of the IDE, I'm personally using a Markdown-based editor. Right now, I'm using Obsidian. Previously, I was using Typora, and Obsidian has that nice integration with Mermaid.js, where you can write your Markdown document specifying what you wanted to say, and then you simply do that code block with the triple tick. You just write mermaid, and then you go with that syntax there, and you have this embedded in the middle of a Markdown document on an outline, which is super, super powerful, because you can keep the whole thing in Git. You can have this image embedded inside of a Markdown document. And if you're using tools like Obsidian, you have links between the Markdown documents. And for me, that really replaced Google Docs for like specifying things, noting things down. Super helpful, including that Mermaid.js component. Some time ago, I was talking with different teams about some integration issues which we have, and I was writing down the whole thing with Mermaid.js. So I did the sequence diagram of exchanging of the messages. And then the embedded developer who was then on that session said, okay, if you give me that file, I can take it from there. I can just add those additional details in that Markdown files to that sequence diagram, because I see the syntax, and it's easy for developers to pick this up, really. So I encourage you to check this out, find if your editor to some extent does support Mermaid.js, drawing sequence diagrams. Yeah, super important, visual and collaborative when you have Git employed there as well. Okay, so we have two more points to cover today. The next section is the tools for testing. So we talked about JUnit, PHP unit a little bit, essentially unit testing tools and like code verifications. But sometimes you do the test on a higher level of abstraction, right? So Artur, I see you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you something. I'm a little bit confused if this is the right place, because I wanted to say about tool for mutation testing, and it's some kind of testing. It's some kind of keeping the code of the test healthy and in good condition. I would say maybe valuable. Um, so if you don't know, mutation testing is a thing that tests your unit test. So it takes assertions from test and try to swap it, and checks if when you swap the condition in the assertion, if the result will be negative. Yeah, if the result is negative, then it means that your assertion is valuable and affects the test result. But when the mutation testing is swapping it, but the result is still that the test passed, that is the alarm that something might be wrong with this particular test. And I remember the tool for it called Humbug in PHP. I don't really know if there is an alternative for any other language, but I think that for ensuring the quality of your solution, like testing or maybe taking into consideration mutation testing it might be a good idea. And it's something that is not that common over the market. So it is also some kind of innovation, even though it's almost lots of years already on the market.
Yeah. So what I've just quickly Googled out, there's a striker, I would say. It's called Striker more. And that's for Node.js. So there seems that there's a possibility to do the mutation testing on the Node.js environments. Although, like you said, it's not a common thing to do so, right? So yeah, you're right. This is something which is falling somewhere between the testing and the source code quality. API testing. That's a big section. Classical solution here, probably the mostly used one, Postman. I guess everybody heard the name. So I don't recall what was there before Postman and curl.
Yes, I would say that curl was there before Postman.
Curl was there before everything.
I think that the Postman is mostly used for the manual testing. So many of us use just a small part of the Postman's functionalities, which are there, and they are pretty nice. I remember having a bunch of API tests. So they were like semi-manual, so you had to fire them by hand, but they were testing like multiple different scenarios. But you can, as far as I know, I never managed to get it like in real project, but I've seen some people doing that. You can use Postman CLI and run the same tests on your CI, which is pretty cool, I would say. So yeah, probably worth trying.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to that, I also recall solutions like Cypress, which is also quite commonly used, especially in the front ends, I would say, right? So UI testing. Whoa, this brings me to a dark past of mine, Selenium IDE.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure how you figure it out when I said dark times, and and then you've also thought about Selenium WebDriver. Yeah, but there for the PHP ecosystem, Selenium was also used as a backend for test. I believe Behat was using that, right? To have the BDD testing done using the interface of the application.
Yeah, I remember that it was so heavy. It was consuming lots of resources.
Yeah, although I must admit that I've like learned the Selenium IDE from the most difficult angle, I would say. So I was doing those tests and creating those tests using that plugin for the browser. So I didn't use any sort of like test framework, which is using Selenium. I've installed the Selenium IDE extension, and then I was recording the whole sequence, adding variables, things like that. Well, this was super useful when I was working with the e-commerce, and I had the task to implement some discount codes logic, and I was covering different types of discount codes like percentage based, amount based, depending if you have the ski inside the cart or not. So if there's a product in there, and I was doing all of those test cases manually, recorded them, and then I was rerunning them just to have a regression test suite. Because I was working at a company that didn't have like a tester role there, so people were also developing code and testing it along the way. Yeah, Selenium, I wouldn't use it today. I would go for Postman for API testing, UI testing. Well, sorry guys, we are old backend developers, so in our pit there's no front end at the moment, at least too much. So, but then again, guys, you're working closer to the front ends, right? So you can say something.
We don't test here. No, just kidding. Yeah, but
Haven't you heard my last snippet? It's worthless to test the UI.
Say it, a backend developer.
You just test the logic that triggers the APIs.
in terms of end-to-end testing in more complex scenario, I think Gatling deserves to be wrong. I recall a really big test case, which I had the pleasure to work with our old colleague Marcin, where we used
we're sending our greetings.
Yeah, so we used Gatling there. Maybe it's not that easy to pick up by Node developers because you have to use Scala there. So it's not that obvious and that easy to start with, but yeah, the capabilities are there. So if you have some like really complex distributed scenario, or you need really high load which has to be distributed across multiple virtual machines, etc., it's definitely a good way to try.
Yeah, Gatling is really awesome. That's performance testing, load testing, really, but you can do very nice scenarios, like really scenarios of actions which are going to be executed. So you're going to have a performance test of a use case and not a single API endpoint, right? So that's really, really cool. The other types of tools which we can mention when it comes to like performance testing, that's well known, probably JMeter, one of the classics. I would say that even before JMeter, the most basic CLI application which was doing the job was the Apache benchmark, so Apache AB. Definitely something to try and use. It's super simple. With a simple command, you can turn your computer to be a load testing machine. Obviously, the amount of threads that your PC can pull off is going to determine the amount of load which you can generate from a single machine there. And if for any reason you would like to do something else there, and you're from the Node.js environments, there's a load test npm package which is doing fairly the same as Apache benchmark. I was using both. I wouldn't say if any of them is way much better than the other, except that Apache benchmark is not super actively maintained, in my opinion. But that's an opinion, so that's subjective, totally subjective. Okay, so the last section which we have for today is talking about any other tools which are there to assist developers and building up projects. So Artur, I know that you've prepared something here.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine a day without Docker Compose now. This tool has like grown into me. I find it very hard to work without Docker Compose environments right now, because it helps me to isolate the environment that I'm testing, and it's actually a tool that can help you with the component testing, so API testing. It makes it very easy to quickly reconfigure it to your local use. It also enables you to use some kind of tools for testing. I wanted only to mention the mockserver.com, which is also my favorite, that you can run on the Docker environment. Yeah, but I think that the introduction of containerization has bring a lot of value to our daily work, and actually making sure that it will behave the same on your computer, so it will behave deployed in the cloud is a value itself that is worth using it.
So the containerization like brought what you said, but it also took away a lot of RAM, I would say.
Because RAM is cheap, Grzegorz.
Not anymore, I would say.
It used still cheaper than our work, and struggling daily.
It depends, yeah. But I would also just want to support the credits for the mock server, because we as developers, we like to reinvent the wheel quite often. And the mock server is there and can serve many use cases and can mock many different stuff there. So yeah, I would highly recommend to think twice if there's some fake server which you want to use for the tests cannot be just replaced by a single instance of the mock server. So yeah, definitely a good tool.
While being at the container side, I really need to mention a project which is called Portrainer. That's a very cool tool to be used in conjunction with Docker Compose. That's essentially giving you an overview of all containers which are running on your machine. So you can see how they are using the resources. You can attach to see the logs, etc. So it's a lot of things you can do using, like the command line. And most of the time I'm a command line guy. But for me, Portrainer also does a lot of work when I want to observe how the CPU graph looks over time on that particular running container and stuff like that. So it's also free to use. You just deploy it locally on your Docker machine, and then it sees all other containers, groups it, displays a lot of stats. Definitely something to check out.
Grzegorz, you introduced some time ago also some kind of tool that can work with containerization to simulate a network split. Could you maybe remind us what it was, because it's very valuable.
Yeah, it's a very cool tool, especially when you like to simulate some disaster scenarios like unresponsive backend services. And the tool was named Blockade. We can put a link there, although Blockade, as far as I know, is no longer actively maintained. There were some problems in running this, but we were still able to do it. But I saw recently people were not using Blockade to do this sort of like stress testing, because you put the system in a stress by cutting things out. Simply doing the Docker network operations on containers, so like plugging a container out of the Docker network is doing fairly similar job. Although the fun part about the Blockade, which I saw, and it's not available in Docker as a command, was to introduce issues on the network. So you could increase the latency or implement packet loss using this. So that was a cool feature of Blockade.
Yes, there is actively maintained tool which can do a lot of the stuff which you are mentioning, which is provided by Shopify, and it's called ToxiProxy. So this is also a tool which can be used to simulate TCP any network issues. Let's say so. I also can recommend this thing.
Okay, cool. Something to try out. Because these sort of tasks, definitely recommending to do something like that, especially when you're having some critical systems. And it really can bring issues with your system up to the surface, right? Sometimes you don't know that there's an issue until you start blocking out Redis, and then you see how the code behaves when Redis becomes unresponsive, right? Suddenly your application is not able to operate correctly. And these kind of tools expose that very, very highly. Okay, so I guess that with having this said, we can wrap up this episode. I'm just curious what kind of tools our listeners do use, what kind of tools you guys would recommend. Let us know in the comments under the episode or via messages in social media channels. We are out there on Facebook. We are there on Twitter. You can also catch us at podcast@arthistoryofcode.com. We're checking that mailbox daily. Don't worry, you won't be missed. So, once again, thank you very much for today, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's all for today. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Visit our page on Facebook and Twitter, leave us a comment under the episode, subscribe to the updates, and share it with others.
We would like to hear your feedback so that we can prepare more interesting content for you to enjoy. See you next time!